This is a video intended to give a little bit more of an idea of how I do my my testing. Obviously, this is Fortnite that I'm running here, and this is what I call desk testing, or some people call it bench testing. So basically, as you can see, I have the hardware built on my desk here. It's sitting on a non-conductive surface, obviously. This is the initial part of how I test a system. So when I do my initial builds, I test them in this way. This lets me make sure that all the parts work, because anyone that's bought a system from me or seen one of my systems knows that the actual build is fairly complicated on these. So this lets me make sure the parts all work before I waste a couple hours of time putting an entire machine together. So I'll let this play for a little while here so you can get an idea of what I'm doing. Again, this is Fortnite. This one I'm going to do another full build video on. So this one's going to have actual full screen game demos, in addition to showing this and the actual physical build. So there'll be quite a bit of video content on this machine by the time I'm done. Quick note here at the beginning, I am not interested in anybody's opinion of my gameplay or how well I play, so no comments on that. I really don't care. I'm going to delete them if you're not really interested in constructive criticism as far as my Fortnite skills. This is a demo. This is to give an idea of how well the system runs, and not how well I can or cannot play Fortnite. I am currently running Fortnite at completely maxed out settings as well, so this is as good as you can get it to look. Okay, anyway, so that gives you a good idea of quick desk testing for gaming. Okay, so once that's done, I shut the system down. Always want to turn the power supply off first before pulling any of this stuff apart. So normally the way I do this, I'll pull this all apart. And put all the components on my glass desk here while I'm getting ready to put the machine together. Okay, so that is the initial testing of the machine, and I will be back in just a minute to start working on building this. This is the second part of my my build video for this particular machine. This is to kind of go over everything I do. I've done little bits and pieces of this with different machines, but I wanted this to actually be a complete. This is the entire process. So this is the hardware build, and I also do a full teardown on all the systems. Interesting. Fan from Deep Cool. It's a fairly nice fan. I've never actually seen standalone fans in a system from them. It's actually pretty snazzy. It's got, let's see, can you see that? It's got embedded rubber grommets in the actual. That's pretty snazzy. That'll help minimize vibration-related noise, things like that. Let's see here. So on these cases, except in the rare occasion, which I have shown on video, except in the rare occasion where I get a brand new case, which usually I don't build with brand new cases. Brand new cases are kind of a waste of money, especially when you're building systems like this. There is literally no good reason to blow part of your system build budget on a brand new case. Cases are literally as bad, if not worse, than cars when it comes to losing, when it comes to depreciating. Cases have such little resale. Even nice cases that are like really, really special nice cases. I mean, like $300-400 cases a couple of years later are routinely worth $75-100. There's, unless you have to have a specific case or a specific look, I would always recommend against buying a new case. There's just no reason for it. So it's pretty rare that you get clean fans, again, aside from the aforementioned possibility of a brand new case. I don't like my systems looking like somebody else's old shit. So regardless of how new or old, cheap or expensive my systems are, typically, unless a fan is really difficult to get at to the point where it risks damaging the system to do so, typically I clean out the fans. And I do a full wipe down on everything. Compressed air, which is what a lot of people like to use, just blows crap everywhere and only gets off the very surface level stuff. It does not get off caked on dust. A little trick that you can use here: use microfiber. You use the plush side of the towel, and it gives you a cheese grater effect in the grates, or whatever you call them, the fan thingamajigger. And then I do so the first thing before I waste the time, I spin the fan and make sure it doesn't have that feeling of a damaged fan. I also typically only build a system with the number of fans it actually needs. Sometimes that does mean I take fans out and hold on to them for future usage. Sometimes it does mean that I add fans to a case that doesn't have enough. It goes both directions, just depending on the system. Sometimes you get one where somebody else has added fans. Sometimes you'll get one where somebody has added way more fans than it needed. Sometimes you'll get one, especially with brand new cases. Manufacturers, that's one of the areas they like to cheap out on. Even nice Antac and Corsair and Thermaltake cases, for example, often will have, depending on your build, I guess a lot of these newer cases, they're assuming that you're putting newer parts in them, so contrary to popular belief, people think you need a ridiculous amount of cooling. Any gaming system built in the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, typically they don't produce enough heat for thermals to be really an issue. Even with stock cooling in most cases, people think they need a ton of cooling, but a lot of the cooling that you see in some of these cases is really just for show. The other reason I like to only put the number of fans that the system actually needs is that I'm pretty picky about noise levels on my systems. And so I really don't like systems to be noisier than they actually need to be. And one of the ways to do that is cut down on the number of fans. And I hope the level of detail I'm showing in this particular video also gives buyers an idea. One of the big points of contention, probably one of the few big points of contention I get from buyers, is the fact that I do not warranty my systems. And as you'll see here with this video, it has nothing to do with any sort of belief on my part that my systems are not high quality. I have every bit of confidence in my systems. But that being said, with this video, you'll see I test these systems as far as they can be tested. The systems cannot be, I don't believe, more tested than what I show here. And I'm not even going to show it because it'd be a ridiculously long video. But typically, like I think it's like 1:30 in the morning, something like that right now. If I finish this system tonight, which I might, I will set it up on looped 3D Mark runs just before I go to bed. And I typically sleep 8 hours plus, so it's going to get 8 hours of... So not only is it going to get at least, 30 minutes to an hour of somewhere between 3 and 10 different AAA titles, it's also going to get... It's also going to get, at least probably 8 hours of 3D Mark Firestrike looped runs, which on an upper mid-range machine like this, I usually turn it up to 2K or 3K resolution to kind of drive it a little bit harder. But once I've done all of that, and I believe as a seller, it is my responsibility to do everything possible to test and or even try to break this system before it gets to you. However, I do not believe that as a Craigslist seller who sells their systems at reasonable prices, I'm not claiming mine are always the lowest, but they are always reasonable. And as somebody who does that, I do not believe it's my responsibility to completely eliminate all of the risk of buying used hardware. If I were charging ridiculous amounts of money, then I could see there would be some sort of moral obligation for me to offer some sort of extended warranty. But it's just after the hardware leaves me, I have no control over it. And it's just operating a full retail establishment just isn't what I do. It's not what I'm here for. Dang it. So these fans sound good. Usually you'll hear when you spin them, not always, but usually you'll hear some sort of clunkiness in the fan if it's a fan that isn't good anymore. They'll still spin, it's just I won't use them because they make noise. If nothing else, I don't want my system being made to sound like crap over a fan that I have a drawer full of that I can just drop a different one in. So I do a full wipe down. Instead of, like I said, the entire thing gets wiped down instead of being just blown out with compressed air, which there might be a little bit of dust compressed air might get that my wipe down doesn't, but as a whole, the wipe down is a better option. The other thing about having the system torn apart like this, especially with the side panel covers, pulling the side panel covers, both of them off like this is a good idea because it's, most of these cases aren't like new, even often the ones that are new. But, you'll have scratches here and there, but I prefer to avoid scratching them unnecessarily. And definitely pulling apart the side panel and taking it all off helps with that. So I think we are just about ready to start building here. One of the other reasons I do the full build on my desk initially is because it gives me a baseline. I know that all these parts work. We just tested them. I know they work. I just spent 15 minutes. I know it's not forever, but I spent 15 minutes running Fortnite at maximum settings, which, that takes a bit of computer to do. Those of you familiar with Fortnite know that running Fortnite at anything over 60 FPS, which it was, at max settings, at epic settings, it's if a computer can do that, it's working. Everything works. So by doing that test, it gives me that baseline, and I know that if this computer doesn't work when I put it together, I screwed something up. Like if something's broken, once I'm done with this, it means I screwed it up putting the machine together. So I will put these back on. What fans I do or do not put in the system will depend on what the thermals, because I can use CPU ID hardware monitor is the main one we use, and that'll tell me if the thermals are where I want them to be or not. So anyone that's seen my ads knows that I do individual photographs for the components. Starting usually with the empty case, having been freshly cleaned out. Not everybody that sees the ad for this machine is going to watch this video, so I'm going to take individual photos of the parts as well. It also helps me out quite a bit because, like if I get somebody, and again, you'll see on my ads, I explicitly state I'm not interested in price negotiations, which is typically the truth. If I get anyone that emails me on pricing related stuff, having photos of the parts lets me look at it and make a quick determination. Okay, I paid this much money for each of the parts. I do or do not have any room whatsoever, which most of these I don't. I mean, I know people think that I just say that, but most of these systems, by the time I've put them together, the amount of effort I've put into them, combined with how much it costs me to make the delivery happen, how much it costs me to, put this amount of time into my systems. Plus, I mean, most people will tell me that typically I'm not using crappy parts. It's not always the highest end parts, but I typically choose parts that pair well together. And that also means there's less... It also means that there's less room for negotiation on prices, because I'm not getting these parts for free. This parts that I use actually do cost money. Especially things like using decent motherboards versus just using whatever I can get my hands on, or even like repurposing OEM boards, which a lot of people do. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing to do, but using higher end boards, stuff like these Asus boards, does cost a little bit more than grabbing whatever generic parts I can get. Arctic Silver 5. I don't know if you can see that. Good stuff. So typically, I also try to avoid wasting system build money on unnecessary extras. Like, for example, this i5-3570. I mean, I guess if you overclocked the hell out of it, you'd probably want to put either a liquid cooler or just a larger standard CPU heatsink on here. But I'm finding the vast majority of my buyers, I don't think I've ever had a buyer that's told me, oh yeah, I overclocked the heck out of the computer, blah, blah, blah. Typically, the people that I sell these to are not overclocking them. And as such, I don't waste system build money on fancy aftermarket heat sinks. Again, I know some people would rather have them, but I would rather spend that money on a faster video card, a faster processor, more RAM, a bigger SSD, something like that, than a part that the vast majority of my buyers aren't going to benefit from. And I will absolutely modify a thermal system or any other part as need be if I'm not getting the performance that I should be. But assuming everything is working the way it should, I don't waste money on unnecessary extras. I don't even like spending money on SSDs, to be honest, just because of the fact that obviously you get faster boot times and load times. However, a faster SSD is not necessarily going to speed up your game frame rate. And most of my systems are supposed to be, my goal with these systems is the absolute best gaming bang for the buck. And an SSD, spending money on the SSD, just doesn't typically contribute to that. But everybody pretty much expects them now, so I kind of just had to start biting the bullet on that and dealing with it. But the other thing, too, that you see with my ads is that I'm constantly putting new systems up. That's because my systems actually sell. And in order for that to happen, in order for me to constantly put new systems up at the quantities that you see my systems going up in, a few systems a week that are new, I have to maintain a supply of parts. And just with the amount of parts that it takes, like RAM, for example, actually obtaining 16 gigs of RAM for each of these systems, it's a lot of RAM that I go through. And I can't just sit around and wait for giveaway deals on these parts to get them in the quantities that I need. I have to actually spend money on these parts. So I try to only spend it on the parts that actually affect your game. I absolutely love building in the Antec 300. It's probably one of the finest examples of a upper low-end case. I guess technically new it was a mid-range case, but as a second-hand case, it's probably an upper low-end case. Another screw here. The only complaint that I have about the 300 is that there is not a motherboard 4-pin / 8-pin pass-through on the back here, so I can never hide the cable for that. I can do my best to mitigate viewability of it. I like all my cables as hidden as possible. Same with the system cables, USB, front panel audio, stuff like that. There's no pass-through on the back side, which I don't know why there isn't. I guess I could start drilling it, but I really don't like jacking around with the cases if I don't have to. I probably should have made sure. I've had this problem with the 300 before. Let's see. Oh, no, it's going to fit. Or is it? Ooh. That's a problem. That isn't going to fit. This is not good. Let's try that one more time. This might not work. Ooh, this is going to suck. Let's see what we got going on here. Dang, man, I could swear I had built one of these before. That is not going to fit. This is like one of those aw shit moments. The initial part I was going to use was a large GTX 780 that also didn't fit, but I mean that was a substantially larger card than this one. I figured this one was going to fit. I think all my cards are pre-tested. Let's see if we have another 970. I'll have to test it separate, but you know what we could do? This is actually the perfect... I'll have to retest it with this, but this is actually a better match card to the system, and it'll let me build this a little cheaper than I otherwise would. Man, I'm kind of even tempted to pull that for 3570K. You know, I'm thinking this might be a different build. I don't like doing it this way, but I'm thinking I might do this as a different build than I was originally planning. Let's see what we have for chips. Been a while since I did an actual real mid-range machine. I guess I could see, this is why I like having parts on hand. Let's see what we can do here. So normally this would be a $490 system, but let's see. The thing with these systems is, again, for those who've bought from me, you know I deliver all over, which means I don't know if this system is going to go, down the street to Snoqualmie, which is very rare. I think I've had one or two that have sold local. Or if it's going to go, Portland, Wenatchee, Yakima, Bellingham. I have no idea where this system is going to go. So I have to choose parts for these systems. So typically I have a set of parts that I paid more for and a set of parts that I paid less for. And it's different for each system. Sometimes I will have had to have overpaid to get my hands on the video card, but then I'll have gotten a really good deal on the board, chip, and RAM, or the other way around. Sometimes I'll have underpaid on the video card, but overpaid on the other parts. So I have to, it's not that I use crappy parts, it's just I have to make sure that the total profit of the parts lines up right, or the system just isn't worth enough money for me to justify delivering it all over the place. So I have to do it's kind of dumb, I have to calculate what these parts are, what I paid to build the system for me to do this. Let's see here. And sometimes I can do the numbers a little differently. Sometimes I'll have a part that's basically I consider it a subsidized part. For example, this GTX 960 I have here, the way I obtained the system that this came out of, I already made back a good bit of my money, so I don't have to account for more than a certain value for this card, which helps this out quite a bit too. This is definitely... Yeah, this will be an awesome little mid-range build. I'm thinking the numbers line up right with this sucker. Guess we'll see if anyone wants it with the specific set of parts. But I'm thinking... So we'll go with a little more of a mid-range i5 chip. So we're going to go with this 3350P, which is a 3.1 gigahertz. It's a little bit slower than the 3570K, but not much. It's not enough that you would be able to notice it using the system as a gamer. You'd have to do some really heavy, maybe not super heavy, but you'd have to be doing work, like encoding work, like mathematics work that actually... You always want to hold these. When you pull these out, you don't have to be super careful with them, but you always want to make sure to hold them on the edge. You don't want to be totally careless and hold them in the middle. Try to keep your hands off the little contacts if you can. So obviously this effectively invalidates my my bench testing here. Which this is why I wanted to do this video, because this one really gives a more in-depth look as to what I do and my build process than I normally give. This was originally going to be somewhere between a $490 to $525 build. Now it looks like what we're going to be going with is a looks like the actual build I'm going to be producing here will be a probably a $400 build. $400 for the build will make it just dead right for the price. 3rd gen i5, 3.1 gigahertz 3rd gen quad core i5, 16 gigs of RAM, GTX 960 video card, high-end power supply, mid-range case. I mean, it's really the perfect set of parts for a $400 build. But again, unfortunately, this is going to invalidate my initial testing. And I'm also going to have to redo some of these photos, obviously. Looks like our flash just went out on that. Yeah, I'm going to stop this for now, and I'll just splice in another video. I'm going to charge the phone, and then I'm going to leave this how it is, because I want this to be a complete build video. So I'm going to leave this sitting here how it is for 20-30 minutes, charge the phone, and then come back to it. So this is continuing this build. So with where we were, it looks like this is going to be a totally different build than I had originally planned. Well, somewhat. So instead of being a $500 3570K with a GTX 970. It looks like we're going to be shooting for more, possibly a slightly sub 400 mid-level build. And this is going to be a fairly long video, so feel free to skip around and see the parts that you want. Obviously, they are somewhat in chronological order as far as what's where. Obviously, you can see the way I'm building these. So. This must be an older Antec 300. The newer ones have a little bit better of cable management. It's not a big deal. I just, as anyone that has seen my systems knows, I really like clean systems. There are some tricks you can use, but without the proper cable management spaces, you can only do so much. It is kind of nice how solid the video card is. A lot of the units with the bigger video cards, those really, like some of them are decent. Like this one, this 970, is a solid card. But some of them, they have, the cooler's well balanced. But some of these things have such big heat sinks on them. And a lot of times you'll even see cards with big heat sinks that don't have this back plate on them, which is just stupid because the whole card just bends around. can make this a little more visible here. That one is not as easy to see. Trying to make this visible in the video. I didn't realize that was as... I hate having to do that. That one does not want to show up in the video. Look at that. Screws just went everywhere. Let's see. The only way I can really do this... I can try that. Kind of visible. So that gives you an idea of where we're sitting right now. It's fairly clean. I mean, like I said, there's only so much you can do with the case's capabilities. There's not really, you can't run. Usually they have like an opening right here, and you can run stuff around back and then through. But I guess this this case must have been made towards the beginning of when they started making what we would consider modern styled cases, before they figured out how to make it really ideal for building a gamer build. This is going to be one of those ones, now that I'm trying to cheap it up a little, that I don't put an SSD in. But I am going to put this 500 gig Western Digital black in it. Western Digital black drives are darn good drives. They perform well. They tend to be ridiculously reliable. I see very, very, very few defective Western Digital blacks. They're just a drive model that lasts. But they also perform well in addition. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and claim it's an SSD, but it probably gives you, these high-performance black drives probably give you the closest thing to the best of both worlds. You know, especially if you don't really want to spend, like, you can get big ones. You can get like 2, 3, 4 terabyte Western Digital blacks, which are great drives. But for this, it'll give us decent performance while also keeping the price down. Because again, when I do a budget build, I'm really trying to stick to parts that are going to actually help your game. So first thing we want to do here is make sure that this set of parts generally powers on and works. Once we do that, we'll be good to go. Most of these parts are pre-tested as well, so before I put parts on the shelf, they do get pre-tested. It's really more of compatibility issues, stuff like that I have to watch for once the stuff gets into the supply. First thing we're looking for is a heartbeat here. See if we get something on the screen. This looks like we're good here. So I'm going to turn this off for now because this isn't going to give you any more of an idea of what I'm doing. This is what we have for now. Once I've done, so basically what I'm going to be going and doing right now is what I did last night with the other set of parts. So I'm going to load probably Fortnite just because it's convenient. I'm going to redo the Windows install, load Fortnite, and do just a basic test. And then once I have that done and I'm back to doing new stuff here, I will start the video again. So this should be the last part. I've got all the parts tested now. Again, same. I just finished doing essentially the same thing that I showed video of last night, although the parts were already in the system. So I just have a few more little things to do here. I got to add one more hard drive, and we have to run some of the system cables. So motherboard USB, motherboard front panel audio, and power, and then it should be good to go. So I don't know how well that's visible, but so now I have all three of the drives set up down here. And I just need one more SATA cable. So with none of the typical pass-throughs a lot of the gaming cases have, as long as there's no, obviously, metallic components on it, you can usually get away with shoving the cable underneath the motherboard if you need. It's just one way to do it. So then what we do, to at least try to hide it a little bit, is you can actually even do this sometimes. Pull the screw, and if the cable is low enough, is a small enough cable, you can shove it all the way under the board. You just want to make sure that it's not going to cause the board to sit at a constant bend, which in this case it clearly is not going to be a problem. And then this one, for our motherboard 4-pin / 8-pin, same thing, we just kind of hide it underneath and then put the screw back in. And those ones, like I said, are small enough diameter cables that you can get away with running them under there like that. Looks like I need one more SATA cable. And this one is going to go for the CD drive. Let's see if I can get this a little better. There we go. And this isn't a bad looking build, it's just it's not quite that next level of every single cable for the most part being hidden, which I really like to do. It's just you're kind of at the mercy of what your case is capable of accepting as far as cable management capabilities. So yeah, so this one has optical drive and then 3 hard drives. I do basic drive tests using a piece of software called Hard Drive Sentinel. It's probably one of the more common pieces of drive diagnostic software. No diagnostic is perfect, but I have found that as a general rule, if Sentinel says the drives are good, they generally are good. I don't have a lot of drives that pass Sentinel and then fail shortly thereafter. In fact, I don't think that's ever happened, to be honest. So I generally give Sentinel the benefit of the doubt. So this is something I like to do. I like to leave the PCI, or whatever you call it, the slot cover just below the video card open, and then all the other ones closed. Just gives you a little bit more airflow than you otherwise would to the video card. You always want to make sure all these screws are tight on the PCIe covers, because if they are not, they are a great source of rattling that you'll get when the fan starts spinning up. And it looks like, let's see, I always wipe my fans down. So down, I think I showed this in another video, but down to the individual blade. You always get more dust off doing it this way than you will using a can of compressed air. You just will. These fans look a little cheesy, but they're actually good Zigmatech branded fans. I pulled about 25 of them off of a defective liquid-cooled build that I took apart a year and a half or so back. And they're good fans. They're quiet, and they go at just the right speed. So they light up white. It's a little odd. They've got white LEDs in them, but aside from that, they're actually really nice fans. So this one's going to be blowing out the back as an exhaust. Come on. There we go. And again, you want to make sure to use all of your, you can attach it with two horizontally opposed screws with the fans, but what'll happen is it'll leave two corners a little bit loose, and once again, that can contribute to excess rattling noises in the case that, at least for me, I really don't want my systems rattling. They do take quite a bit of effort on some of these screws. If you don't have exactly the ones, there's a few variations, slight variations on screw grommets, is that the word? And so sometimes you'll have to put a little more effort into actually screwing the screw in. And I don't know if it was visible before when I did it, but another one of the techniques I use to hide the cabling is when before I put the fan in, I kind of tuck the excess length underneath the bottom of the fan. Typically you have like that much space you can shove cabling into, and that lets you hide the excess fan cabling. And then I like to kind of hide the rest of it in between a couple of the ports there. I think we'll add, normally I don't do it, but with the number of hard drives I put in this machine, I think I'm going to put another, NZXT will probably work. Maybe not. Yeah, you can hear them. When you spin the fan, you can hear ticking noises. I usually just toss those ones with the ticking noises. It doesn't really matter how how high-end or low-end the fans are. You get defective high-end ones, defective low-end ones. This one sounds pretty solid though. And this, having the two fans here, will have air blowing forward, and then that's your exhaust out. In this case, it'll work quite well. Dust on the hard drive there. Really like to get my systems as close to back to new as possible as far as particularly like dust is concerned. Sometimes it can be quite the chore to get these fans to plug in the way you want. Come on. There we go. Okay. So usually before I finish up with a fan, I like to turn the system on for just a sec and make sure it's not tweaking out. See, that's a nice clean sounding fan. Even the ones that you hold up to your ear and spin them and they sound fine, that's just like a quick indicator. Sometimes even those ones will end up being screwed up when you actually power them on. And it's not that they won't work. I mean, they'll still blow air. It's just you'll get that annoying, I think it's like failing ball bearings or something noise. And some people don't care, but I like the fans to have a nice clean sound to them where all you hear is the sound of the air flowing, but you don't really hear the fan itself ticking or anything. Darn it. Okay. it's a little messy right here where we've got all our cables coming out, but it's better than could be. Okay, so I hope these videos give people an idea that I think a lot of people think I just throw a few parts together and pawn these things off on people on Craigslist, and I really put a lot of time and effort into my builds. And not just the ones that are going on video. All of the builds get built using pretty much the same technique as this. The only difference per system is obviously, again, as I've said before, you have certain limitations that are created by the case. Obviously, the case will dictate what the final build is, as was seen with this particular unit. But aside from that, they're all built using the same technique. Some will look a little cleaner, some will look a little less clean. This is going to be on the less clean side just because of the lack of cable hiding space. Another thing I did with this too, I would have mentioned it earlier, but I forgot. Let's see if you can see that in there. So I made it so that, I used the right angle SATA connectors, because the video card kind of moves over, kind of goes out over the SATA ports. I use the right angle SATA SATA connectors so that I'm using the two that are underneath the card as well as the other ones. So it does leave two more open SATA ports as well for upgrades later. Okay, so I think we're done here. Yeah, give you a little, can you see that? Yeah, give a little bit of a 360 here. Should close this up. That is our final build. So again, as with all my videos, I hope this is informative and gives everybody an idea of what exactly I'm doing with these systems. And I hope you found it informative, and thanks for watching.